go ahead and get started.
Bingo.
All right. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. We have a wonderful panel of death doulas tonight that are going to be sharing their vast experience and knowledge in end-of-life care. We hope to have a lively discussion on death tonight, and our panelists have a really diverse range of experience to speak on the topic from different perspectives. It's going to be a roundtable discussion, but we will be taking questions from all of you at the end. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat as they come up. We do have a lot of people on the call, so rather than turning on your video and speaking, just go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we get to them either in the moment or at the end after our discussion. So we're so lucky to have our panelists here tonight. We have Patricia Ballentine, Centurione. Did I get that right, Janene?
Mm-hmm.
Great. And Katlyn Green Johnson. And my name is Mara Bobbitt, and I'm moderating tonight's discussion on behalf of the Green Burial Council. So for those of you that have maybe not heard about the GBC and what we do, we're a nonprofit, and we are run by a really, really dedicated and passionate volunteer board that advocates for green burial access, both from within the funeral industry and on behalf of the public. And we do that in a few ways. We certify green burial funeral homes, cemeteries, and products. And we also provide a lot of awesome educational resources and outreach, such as the webinar that we are having tonight. So as I said, we're a nonprofit, so you'll see there is a QR code there. If you are so moved, we hope that you'll consider donating so that we can keep these educational offerings like this webinar free and accessible for everyone. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists so that they can briefly introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their work in the death care industry and how they came to it, where they're based. And then we'll dive into our topics for tonight. So any volunteers for who wants to go first?
Sure.
Okay, Kate.
First.
Oh, Patricia, wonderful.
I'll go first. My name is Patricia Ballentine. I live in Little Elm, Texas, which is just north of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I think I came to this work as an integral part of my spiritual practice. My practice is earth-centric or nature-based.
Oh, Patricia, you seem to be muted.
I apologize.
There we go.
Jumped in and said I'd do it, and then I got put on mute. So I'll start over. I'm Patricia Ballentine. I'm in Little Elm, Texas, north of Dallas-Fort Worth. And I came to work within what I consider the death threshold, doing the work as a midwife and having a focus on things that relate to green burial because my spiritual practice is earth-centric or nature-based. And I have long believed that the earth is as holy as any bodies that we return to her. And therefore, there is not, in the best case, any separation between our physical form and the earth that takes her back. These days, I do practice as a midwife in what I consider the three flames. The first flame being working with folks to help them get directives, understand their options for end-of-life care and all of those things. I do bedside vigil work, which I consider the second flame. And the third flame is anything and everything that relates to ceremony, ritual, legacy work, whatever might continue on after the last exhale.
That was beautiful, Patricia. Thank you so much. Janene, would you like to go next?
Sure. So
Thank
my
you.
name is Janene Centurione, and I live in Longmont, Colorado, which is close to Boulder. close to the mountains, and I'm watching a big snowstorm up on the mountains while we're talking right now. I came to death doula work in a very different path. I'm a biochemist with an MBA and was working in academic medical centers, helping physicians and scientists translate their science into products and into the marketplace. And in 2017, my husband and I moved to Estes Park, and I was still doing a lot of consulting work. And then COVID hit, and all of the consulting work ended. And I felt so helpless because I'm not clinical. I couldn't go work in the emergency room. I'm not a nurse. I couldn't work on the hospital floor and help people. But I was in a hiking pod with a group of birth doulas who kept talking to me about the role of a doula and how they wished that they had death doulas or end of life doulas as part of their continuum of care. And I got fascinated and I did online training during COVID. And after that, I have private clients. I don't do bedside vigil. Actually, I'm doing the other things that Patricia is not speaking of, which is helping people think about what end of life looks like. I volunteer with hospice. I work in an inpatient hospice unit. But then I also started working with the Natural Funeral, which is a funeral home based in Colorado. And we are the only funeral home in the country that provides all eco-friendly options, green burial or natural burial, which we'll talk more about, water cremation, and human body composting. All of which our mission is to help people think about death and their end of life in a more creative way, thinking outside the box on what their legacy is and what story they want to tell in their final journey and after that, and then returning their body to repair the earth. I was with somebody today and they said, well, humans have done a lot. And I said, yes, and this is the way that we can start to repair in the best way possible, is to return ourselves to the earth. So there you go.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, Janene. And last but certainly not least, Katlyn.
Thank you so much for having me. So my story is quite different, but I have a lot in common with our other two panelists. I have been a practicing doula since 2009 and had a private doula consulting company for a long time. I have recently closed my doula practice because January 1, I started full time in the funeral home, and I wanted there to be no conflict of interest, no misunderstandings. Because when I was a practicing doula, I realized really early on in education that most people are familiar with a birth doula. An expectant mother can have a baby in a clinic, in a hospital, at home. We even know what to do if the baby comes on the side of the road. And there is no stigma. People say it's the most beautiful thing that ever happens. There's insurance for it, there's coverage for it, there's support for it. There's even things to buy on Amazon. You can buy all of the cute trinkets and things that you want. And it dawned on me pretty early that we as a country are lacking in the care of our older adults, but even more so in the informed consent. I'm a big believer in informed consent. No, you don't have to do embalming. No, you don't have to fill in the blank. It's about personal choice. And so I went to mortuary school with the design, one, to shake it up in this industry. I'm just outside of Nashville, so you can probably tell I've got a little bit of a twang. I'm ninth generation Sumner County, Middle Tennessee, and so I love history. I love the history of funeral service. I love how our culture talks about it. Sometimes it's not great, but I love the evolution of that. I also teach mortuary school for Pierce Mortuary Colleges. And so we were talking just a few minutes ago that Pierce now offers death doula classes.
Hmm.
And that is huge for our industry. So I really appreciate you having me. My background is gerontology. I do a lot of Medicare, Medicaid planning, but it's all about the options. And so I'm thrilled with this panel. I told the other two, I really don't want to follow you guys. They are awesome.
Yeah, I hope you all see what I meant by having a really, really diverse range of experiences and knowledge. We've got scientific backgrounds, we have people working in the funeral industry, we have art backgrounds, engineering backgrounds. So I'm really, really excited for all of the perspectives that y'all can bring to this conversation. So we are the Green Burial Council. So I would love to hear how you all came to learn about natural burial and what was your first kind of experience with it and how did it become a part of your offerings and passions as a doula or end of life worker?
Oh, well, I'll go. Um,
Thank you, Janene.
So, as I said, I work for the Natural Funeral, and part of what I do is help people think through what their plans are. As a doula, the three things I say to people consistently is, first of all, think about what you want your end of life to look like. Secondly, write it down. And number three is share it. Those three things together really are a gift to your loved ones as they try to figure out what to do with you. Whoops, here. Did I lose my video? There we
Here
go.
you are.
Yeah, something just happened there. So when I started to work with the Natural Funeral, of course, I needed to understand deeply what all of our options are. And we do offer green or natural burial. We work with two different cemeteries that are green certified here in Colorado. And so I actually went and worked with the grounds crew to understand what it was like to open the grave, to prepare for families to come and be with their person. We do a lot of reverent body care, and I'm one of the facilitators to help with reverent body care, which is the loved ones helping prepare their person for that last journey, and particularly to green burial. Um, and I'm passionate about it because number one, I want people to return to the earth and help the earth to be healthier, but it is also an ancient practice. So helping people be in touch with that ancient practice, because it's the way we've taken care of our loved ones for thousands and thousands of years. And we've here in the US lost touch with that sense of ritual around those sacred moments.
Absolutely. There's nothing more traditional than a natural burial or a green burial. Katlyn or Patricia, would y'all like to share your origin stories in natural burial? I also invite the three of you to stay unmuted so that we can kind of interact and have a sort of roundtable discussion.
Sure.
So feel free to jump in.
I'm happy to. We can keep kind of round robining in the order we were. Either way, I'm probably going to sound strange when I say I am drawn to holistic things, natural things, green things, because those are my roots, those are my values. You might be surprised to know that just because you choose whatever disposition, we still do reverent body care.
Mhm.
Some people think shrouding, for example, is only during a green burial. No, we do all of these rituals. So when you go through mortuary school, one of the quotes that you are just applied to your forehead is that show me how people treat their dead and I'll tell you what they value in their society. And so my pull and passion is about, I said that informed consent, but a person-centered care. The word doula in itself is a person who serves. It comes from the ancient Greek. It is a servant leadership. It is a person-centered, holistic space where we hold reverence for whatever that person needs. We don't apply to prescribe things, fix things. We walk with people. That's how I was raised. Now, I will say I am going to be a little bit of the odd man out because I was raised very Southern, very old school Southern. I remember as a child sitting up with the dead. I remember my grandparents and older generations laying people out at home. I love that, getting back to our roots and the things that really matter. And these ethics parallel. Green Burial Council, those values parallel for me. And so I love anything that's beautifully meaningful. What about you, Patricia?
I love that. And I'll just follow up. I just shared some things with some friends today because so often I hear doulas, especially after they've recently come through training, say, "Well, I'm trained, but I'm not really working. I'm focusing on taking care of friends and family." When in fact, that origin of taking care of friends and family is the essence of the service that we are part of. And it's been that way for thousands of years. So, both of you spoke to that. And so the word that you just shared, Katlyn, that's essential for me, and part of this work that I do as a midwife is how I describe myself, has to do with beauty and how we are in that threshold, in that care of the beloved dead and their families. And for me, it's an integrative thing. There really is no place in my life where I can say, I've got my doula hat or my midwife hat on here, and I don't have it on here. It's something that's integral to me. And I'm a grandmother, I'm a live-in grandma, I'm a visual artist. And so when I think about the origins of my connection with green burial, again, it's something that I connect with through my spiritual practice, but it's also something that is essential in my life as that live-in grandma, because for me, it's not only about how we care for humans, it's about how we care for all of our members of our family and beings of nature. And in our home, in our yard, we have a cemetery as such for creatures and critters. And that's how I teach my grandchildren about how to be present to death. The other thing that I weave in for myself is that as a visual artist, and in that idea that there's no place that I am not a death worker, I have over the last few years begun to make burial shrouds. And again, it's exactly as you say, the shrouds that I make are handmade. They are all organic materials, natural paints, but they are also used in all forms of end of life care, whether a body is being cremated, whether they are going to be buried in a traditional manner. Shrouds are part of how we embrace, in a way that is filled with beauty, the remains of our beloveds.
So we had an interesting question come in, which I'll go ahead and read out. So Rebecca asked, my question is, how do you introduce or sell green burial to a community who has such a strong graveyard culture? I'm based in Ireland, but not Irish, and don't know how to promote green burial with minimal or alternative grave markings and processes without it seeming disrespectful. So before I turn it over to y'all, this seems like a good moment to address the sort of definitions of green burial and the sort of different levels of it. So at the GBC, we do certify different types. We do hybrid, we do conventional. So I think there's sort of a myth that a natural burial may not be accessible to you if there isn't a natural burial ground or a GB certified burial ground near you even. But if you can find a cemetery that allows you to be buried in a shroud or in an alternative container that's biodegradable and without a cement lining in the grave, then you can have a natural burial in any cemetery. So we do certify those hybrid locations where you can have that. A conventional, or excuse me, a conservation cemetery is sort of the highest level of certification that we have, which is uh, taking it a step further, where it's going towards conservation of the land, and the sales of the plots are going towards conserving the land. They don't allow any kind of grave markers, and it's a much more stringent certification. So to Rebecca's question, I'm curious if y'all could share maybe some challenges that you've faced in educating families that might have been a little bit unsure about a natural burial in like a conservation cemetery setting, and ways that you might help walk them towards that comfort, and realizing how deeply respectful that kind of ceremony can be.
I would first speak to cultural competence. And I was actually just replying to someone in the chat, but I'll go ahead and speak to the next question because this has been on my mind all day. One of our listeners said, it feels challenging for me as a woman of color to see a lack of diversity in this panel. And I was replying that I can understand that feeling. That gives you a nervous feeling. For me, one of my biggest missions with this work is cultural competence. And this speaks to the people we serve. I make it a note or a goal of mine in a practice meditation to check my agendas or check my feelings at the door. One of my mentors used to say, take your shoes off at their house. And I have a huge Hispanic clientele, so I want to learn about their culture, their expectations, their rituals. Hispanic families, primarily in this area, are shipped back to their home country to be buried. That requires embalming to go on an airline. That's hard to cope with when you struggle, when you put these values on top of each other. How can we do this or how can we do that? And my answer to this question, in Ireland, what's important to them? Because most people, when they come to us, we cannot expect them to be experts in our field. Most people don't fully understand fully green burial. Some people don't understand cremation or the religious rites of different groups about it. I have a lot of clients that do not believe in cremation. They don't believe in it. It's very hurtful religiously. They don't identify with it. I need to know that when they come to me. If I have clients of Jewish descent, I know that that is a very natural process with no chemicals, and there's to be no metal on the casket. Green burial aligns with that culture very well. And so, diversity in this subject, especially when you feel like you need to sell, my advice would be to meet people where they are, listen twice as much as you speak. They'll tell you what's important, and then you give them the options. It is theirs after all. Maybe they love the idea of green burial at a different spot or a different place. I've done some green burials on homesteads and old farms and things like that. That is a very generational cultural thing. I know that's not all of the answer, but that would be my advice, is to think about the cell last, put the human quality first, and it'll come to you. Ladies, do you agree?
I agree completely with what you just shared, as well as the comment or the response to Vanessa. I was just like you, working in that. And I just want to sit with that for a moment, because that's a very present concern for many of us. I've been involved in national organizations where we look at the faces on our boards, and we have to be aware and actively working to improve the equity and the diversity that's represented. That's one piece. In response to the other question about how we introduce or sell green burial, in my experience, when I'm working with a client or a family in the early phases of doing this planning, there's not a piece of me where sell is part of the language. It's an exploration of what their comforts are, what their interests are, making sure that they have the wide range of information so that they can make an informed choice. The one piece that I do want to mention is that in all of this, it's important for us to, as midwives or doulas, be really clear about what our experiences and our capabilities are. Some of what we can do within our practices in some of these conversations varies from state to state. And we need to be aware of that as well. So on to you, Janene.
Well, I'm somewhat blessed because the people that come to talk with me have chosen the conversation because they know we offer natural funerals. And I never feel like I'm selling within that conversation. I'm actively listening to who they are and what is important to them, what is important about their legacy, and educating around what the options are so that they can pick the best thing for themselves and for their families. A lot of what I also spend time doing is helping people think outside of this box that they think a funeral has to fit in. You know, there can be a very specific picture of how it's supposed to work. And so I tell lots and lots of stories about my clients and the choices that they have made. One of the things that has been of benefit for me for green burial is I work with this community cemetery that is in a small artist community in Colorado that many people know and love. And the fact that green burial is offered in this pioneer cemetery is very attractive to people. And it is also on a river bluff. There's a river below the cliff, and it's where we have some of our largest bluegrass festivals 3 times a year. And so people use this beloved cemetery as a place to listen to music, to celebrate life together. It's a lovely community space, and I think helping people feel a connection to the space itself helps move toward whatever their choice is. Because I think people are drawn to the earth naturally, and helping them find where that connection is part of what I do.
Thank you all for those thoughtful responses. And thank you, Vanessa, as well, for your comment and for allowing everyone to speak on that and bring that into the conversation. I really appreciated Katlyn mentioning the importance of cultural competency in funeral service, because it is, it often the funeral is guided by spiritual and religious practices, which are so highly individual to individuals, and having even knowledge and awareness is best, but if you don't have that knowledge, then having the openness to listen and understand and learn what people need and want from their funeral services. And I also really appreciated Patricia mentioning a really important point that the laws do vary so significantly state to state. And so it can be really, really hard to find information about what services are available in your area, or who might be able to provide the type of service that you want, because there's really no way to answer that question in a national way. It's really, really different. So thank you all so much for all of those points that you made. Um,
Mara, you have
Go
a
ahead.
direct Mara, you have a directory, don't you? Of because I see a question about how you find local green burial options. You have a directory, don't you, that you can share?
We do, yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So yes, the GBC, as I mentioned at the beginning, we do certify all over the country and even all over the world. We have some providers outside of the United States even. So that's a great place to start. You can look for a funeral home and a cemetery and even a product provider if you're looking for a biodegradable casket or shroud. You can find all of that stuff on our website. And I will be sending a follow-up email to everybody with a recording of this, and I'll be sure to include a link to that directory in that email. So thank you for bringing that up, Janene. And then a lot of people might find that there isn't a natural burial ground in like listed on our website right near them. Do y'all have advice for what you might suggest to a family if they were facing that, if they really, really wanted a natural burial and there wasn't one in the area? What options you might give?
There are a number of additional resources that list by state green burial options. Again, some of them we've spoken about specific religious and spiritual traditions. One of the things that I discovered in a group that I was participating in is that, for example, the Baha'i faith really their tradition is a green burial. And so where cemeteries in our area may not be listed as green, they have exceptions for particular religious or spiritual practices. And so sometimes it takes some work to dig into those resources. The other thing that I wanted to mention regarding Henny's question about finding a local green burial funeral home is that green burials are not necessarily tied to funeral homes or specifically the funeral industry in that way. In most states, it is not required to have a funeral home involved in the funeral itself or the last rites. So again, that's something that is determined state by state. And that's why it's important to be able to have some additional resources in that. And so not all funeral homes may be interested in green burials, but not all green burials require a funeral home to be an active member in that.
That's such a great point, and thank you for bringing that up. Like you're correct both in that not every you can not use a funeral home in almost all states, and also every funeral home is capable of preparing someone for a natural burial. So even if they aren't certified, if you know how to ask for what you want, then that's absolutely accessible to you at every single funeral home. But you do bring up a topic that we haven't quite touched on yet. And I do want to mention, I noticed we have the Home Funeral Alliance here on this call, and that is another great resource for finding resources. If they're not listed on our website, that's a great place to go. So what is a home funeral? For people that might not know on this call, can you share, Patricia, maybe, or any of you, could you share what that actually means?
It can be as simple as the family gathering around after the last exhale with the beloved departed to a vigil that's held over a period of days in the family home without removing the body to a funeral home or taking the body to another location. The ceremonies, the funeral ritual itself There, in truth, are very few practical rules about what a home funeral has to look like. It is, again, it ought to be, if we're putting this care of our beloveds at the end of their life back into the hands of the family, it is best formed by what the family's values and traditions and practices are. And so I have participated in home funerals where it took place within hours after the body was cared for by the family, wrapped in a shroud. Folks gathered, there was music. They shared a meal that consisted of all of Grandpa's favorite food. Um, and everything was completed within just a few hours, to something that unfolds and over a period of time. The body does not have to stay in one location. It can be transported by the individuals. And again, there are laws that dictate this by state, but my dad could die in my home. We could have bedside vigil there. We could move him to another place that was one of his favorite places in a park to be. And we could have additional gathering and honoring there before he is then moved to the final resting place, or until he's taken to the facility where he will be cremated.
Yeah, I had the privilege of working at the Forest Conservation Burial Cemetery up in Ashland, Oregon, and the majority of burials that took place there were home funerals that had very limited involvement of funeral homes. But on the other hand, a lot of people may not feel prepared or ready for that, and funeral homes are absolutely able to provide that care and bridge that gap for people.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually, if the family and the loved one would like to have a home vigil and a home funeral, we support that and we provide those services. We come and help set up the care that the body needs based on the amount of time that the family has decided they would like to keep them in the home before they move on to whatever their dispensation is. So that's a very active conversation for us.
That's wonderful to hear. And we do have a couple of people that have asked this question, so I want to go ahead and
Mark,
address
can I
it.
cut in before you proceed?
Oh, absolutely, please.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but before I lose my train of thought, like I always do, I see the question we're leading into, and that's something that very much interests me. But if you'll notice, after that, there's a comment called, they said family-led funerals.
Mhm.
And to nerd out just a little bit in the history of funeral, we used to keep people at home. We lived at home, we worked at home, we had generations in the home, we cared for our aging and we cared for our dead. And for those of you outside the undertaker type roles, it used to be the undertaker that built a wooden casket with no metal, and it was a natural home funeral.
Right.
Those two things are very organic in our culture. And you can watch how America evolves by the types of caskets that we bury people in. You can see the negative taboos. You can see the metal with the glass that looks like the sailor ship. You can see, we went from in Jamestown, we dug a moat and we shrouded the body and did a natural burial that way. Then we started with wooden caskets. Then we did metal, and then we got back away from that. And then we had grave diggers and grave robbers and all of these things. But in the old days, an undertaker would come after the death, after the family had washed the body, either incense, oil, salt, something, dress the body. The undertaker would come, and in the early days before the Civil War, there was no embalming. They measured the decedent, built the casket, and usually buried them right there at the home, at the farm, at the church, right? We can still do that today. And in the South, we are still doing that today. I think that's beautiful. I also think we're coming back to that. We're coming back to our roots and out of this kind of commercialism, commission driven yah that we're dealing with, right? But even in history, once we started embalming, it was actually a one type procedure where they embalmed under the arm at home, and it was just enough to lay you out without stinking. That's what the literature says. After that, we started this death narrative. We used to lay people out at home in the parlor, right? Southern, in the parlor. Then we got funeral parlors because we didn't want to lay them out at home. It was uncomfortable. Then we got to doing funeral homes because parlor was too homey. Our parlor was so old school. We thought we were cool. We went commercial. And now we have uh, memorial homes, and we don't even want to say the word funeral. When we get back to our roots, we start to live with this idea of death. We all have a personal relationship with death. For some Americans, it is a very unhealthy relationship. For some people, it's a very beautiful, in tune with nature relationship. And so a lot of our questions about this is all in how we approach it. If we, as practitioners, approach it that way, so will our people. You've got to think about Americans are watching things like Grey's Anatomy. That's how they think CPR works. It does not, right? They're watching things like, I almost said The Grateful Dead. That's not it. The Walking Dead. Whew, long day. The Walking Dead, and they're okay with zombies and violence and gross. Like, and we're going, that doesn't happen. That would never happen. That's what they think is normal. And so we are fighting this negative death narrative. And when we get back to our roots and get back to our values, it's the most natural thing in the world. Okay, I'm off my soapbox.
Well said. Thank you.
Very well said. And we have a couple of people who are curious about, I think I'll probably give this one to you, Janene, as our scientist on the panel, soil expert, perhaps. Um, we have a couple of people that are curious about the presence of pharmaceuticals and chemotherapy agents. Someone asked specifically about the medical aid in dying medication that's ingested and how those chemicals affect the body at the time of burial. They're curious if that might disqualify a person from conservation burial, and if there's a measurable environmental impact on the soil.
I actually would like Katlyn from her background to answer this so that it is factual.
I love it. Okay, well, we're going to go together. Back me up.
All right.
So, from my aging and geriatric background or gerontology practice, most studies say that chemicals like chemo, let's say specifically, tend to stay in your system because they are foreign bodies about 2 to 3 days. And that your kidneys and your liver filter them and they will then be secreted out in bile and urine. That's what the research says. The doula part of me says that makes kind of sense to me, kind of, because as we begin the dying process, most people don't just close their eyes in death. We go through stages and our body starts to walk through this labor of dying. And when I talk to families and they want to know, what do I expect? What am I about to see? Well, first, you're going to see a very, very slow down of energy. You're going to see incontinence. You're going to see eventually a bed-bound person. They're not going to be able to get up and ambulate. We then start to see dysphagia, which is the slowing down or inability to swallow, which is why most meds are liquid. Those liquid meds run through the system much quicker. So for those that have been on a deathbed, like a sick patient or a sick bed, they may have been bedbound and processing these for weeks. Once our clients go through something like hospice or palliative, they are no longer eligible to do life curing treatments like chemo, radiation, and some of these stronger barbiturates. That gives a longer time for those to go out of the system. And of course, as our bodies shut down, our incontinence will let go. We will dispose of waste as our body relaxes, and a lot of times that is medication. Um, the other side of that question, the question was with MAID. The cocktail that is prescriptioned with MAID has a couple of details with it because I think that plays a big role in it. It is a cocktail of, if I remember, phenobarbital, morphine, and another comfort drug that goes all together. It has to be self-administered by someone of clear thought and mind. So it also has to be cleared by two doctors. You all probably know more about MAID. However, it is fairly quick that the body relaxes, it is free from pain, they go to sleep, and then their breathing ceases. That makes me question what that medicine, does it have time to be filtered? What I don't know is that does that preclude you from taking part in some of these rituals? I would say it depends on where your plans are. If you are in a reserve that is truly green and no chemicals, I would say someone who just passed from ingesting barbiturates that may not mesh well. So it's very person specific in my purview. Ladies?
I don't have experience with it, but I really appreciate the detail of your explanation.
Thank you.
Exactly what I was hoping, because I am not sure about MAID. I do know that when someone has a natural burial, that we say it takes almost 20 years for the body to fully decompose. So there is a very, very long period that takes place. With water cremation, I do know the scientific studies on water cremation and human body composting, which all of those chemical matters are broken down and are not returned to the soil. I'm just not as familiar with MAID and green burial.
I've not personally heard of any conservation cemetery refusing remains based on any medication that a person has taken. I don't know if there are any board members on the call that could correct me, but I've never heard of that being the case. And I would say that soil is a really excellent filter and it's good at what it does. And decomposers are good at decomposing.
Sure. Well, this is going to be a conversation that we are going to have ongoing. There are 11 states in the union where MAID is legal, and it is a huge topic of conversation. That is a great question, and I think we're going to see more of it. And I love the conversation. I think it's worth having with people that are interested in both. Sure, we will figure it out. Um, the last thing I'll comment on that is just something that's kind of interesting to me because I'm a nerd. Did you know that most green cemeteries, and when I say green, I don't mean conservation, I mean local church cemeteries, private cemeteries, and family cemeteries, don't require a vault.
Mm.
Most perpetual care cemeteries do. And so those kinds of questions are like, well, why what if I just wanted a wicker basket? Fine. This speaks to what Patricia said earlier, that there are more than reserves that will honor green burial traditions. So it may be that a local church cemetery has green burial. They just don't call it green burial. That's normal for them. And so that's where I would start the conversation about taking cremation or classes, or taking radiation treatments or chemo treatments, or I think this or I want that. I say, let's look into it.
That's a really great point. Where I'm located in Bexar County, Texas, And the only cemeteries that don't require vaults are Catholic, Muslim, or Jewish. So that's a great place to start. We did have a question come in as well, um, about any schools that you might recommend, or perhaps trainings for someone who's wanting to become an end-of-life doula themselves. Or you could perhaps share how you became an end-of-life doula and how you achieved your certification, however you'd like to take that.
I'll respond to that. And I see one person who asked that question said they were Ohio based. I received my training through Earth Traditions as a death midwife. They are located in Wisconsin, and it is the primary trainer is Angie Buchanan. And she is not traveling as much nationally as she has in the past, but she does still do travel to do trainings. One of the people that I work very closely with in Indiana is Lauren Richwine, and her practice is Death Done Differently. And she does online classes as well as in-person mentorships. And my one recommendation would be that when folks are making inquiries or looking for opportunities for training, even though a lot of training now happens online, I think it's very important to receive training from folks who have hands-on experience. Folks that have been working themselves in the death threshold for an extended period of time. And as I say, I do recommend Lauren Richwine with Death Done Differently, because I have a number of years of experience with her. She and I also partner on some creative pieces that she uses in training folks for shrouding bodies and that sort of thing. She and I have developed a doll that's used to enable people who are studying to have some hands-on experience with what that is like. But it was through my experience with her that I also gained some of my insights regarding how important it is when you receive training to make sure that you have resources that are specific to the state that you are living in. Lauren was one of the people, some of you certainly in the doula world are very aware, is someone who was shut down by the funeral industry over 2 years ago. Because in the state of Indiana at that time, it was not legal to have a conversation with families about end-of-life options unless you were a licensed funeral director.
Oh.
At the same time, as an example, in the state of Indiana, it was not legal to have a celebration of life with the cremated remains of a beloved unless there was a licensed funeral director present. And so her practice was shut down. She was able to get national representation. And just in the last several months, there has been a ruling made that overturns some of that. But again, this is something that knowing as we get our training as doulas or midwives, what the statewide environment is that we're working within is extremely important.
That's a great point. And Holly in the chat shared something that's similar to what you said, that working in as a hospice volunteer is an excellent way of getting experience, which I think speaks to your point of, training is wonderful and getting certifications is wonderful, but there's really no substitute for that hands-on experience and that knowledge that you gain from experience and actually sitting at bedsides.
I second that so much. I saw that at the same time you did, Maura, and we were like, yes, yes. I would like to talk a little bit about that there is no regulating body for doulas. We are, quote, non-medical, quote. Okay, fine. There's not a regulatory body. And so when one in the profession does something inappropriate, it hurts us all. And it's the same way in the funeral profession. Um, there's been a lot of rub between doula and funeral because it's a get out of my sandbox kind of thing sometimes. I'm very sorry to hear. I follow her and I did not know she had been through all of that. That takes my breath. That takes my breath. You're right, because it's not that way in Tennessee. But I am from a very southern, traditional meat and three visitation, fried chicken kind of culture, right? But as doulas, we have to step beyond this. And I would say that different doulas practice different things. I know death doulas that only sit vigil. I know doulas that only celebrate rituals. I know doula, we specialize in different things. And so no one program is perfect. I would say that follow the money and ask where your program started. I recommend all of the ones that you all have mentioned. The University of Vermont has a impeccable program. Um, there's a lot. There's a lot. I went through INELDA, International End of Life Doula Association. I love Henry Fresco Wise. He comes at it through a social work, hospice type of purview, which is very interesting. It's very person-centered, very psychology. I've also gone through, I've done 3 or 4 just to learn. I'm insatiable and I want to learn. But I echo Holly's comment that volunteer, take care of your family, take care of your friends, take care of people in your circles. Be the one that people can ask, and you will be a heck of a doula.
So I also want to say there are many programs that are out there, and I think finding the right match for you with your learning style, what you think your strengths are, and how you would like to express them. And I think really important is finding a program that has, after you've done your certification or you finish the program, that there's mentoring or there's a follow-up because you never stop learning. And talking with the people that are at the bedside and working through specific examples are are the best possible way to be as compassionate as we can possibly be. And no one is going to give you all the answers. It is just opening the door to walk through and learn more and consistently thinking how you can better support the community that you're living in.
Absolutely. And I'm very sorry to say, but we are at time. It is already 7.
Wow.
I know. I hate to stop this conversation. It's been so enriching, and I'm just so grateful to all 3 of you for sharing your time and your knowledge and your experience, and also for all of the attendees for your engagement in the conversation and all of your questions and comments. We really, really appreciate everybody coming together tonight to talk about green burial and end of life care and how we can make it better. And I personally feel very inspired by this, and I hope you all do too, and that you'll join us for our next webinar. We have them at the end, the last Wednesday of every month at the same time. So I hope you'll keep an eye out for the next one with Marianne Perry. And thank you all again to our panelists, Patricia, Katlyn, Janene. You're all wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Such an honor.
Very much, very much. I am so motivated. You guys have just
I
geared
know,
me
I just
up.
want to keep talking to you guys.
I
So
know, let's do this again.
yes, yes. So much to learn.
There
I know,
always
and I
is,
feel we
isn't it
barely
great?
scratched the surface.
You all have a great night and feel free to keep in touch. I love this.
Right. And I will say, Mara's going to put my information at the end. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, have a further conversation, learn more about all the things, please get in touch. I'd be happy to.
Here, here.
And for me.
Absolutely. And if I did miss any questions in the chat, if we didn't get to your question or something comes up, feel free to respond to the follow-up email and we'll answer it and send any resources that were mentioned tonight as well. Those will be linked in that email. So have a good night, everyone, and thank you again on behalf of the Green Burial Council for joining us.
Thank
Right.
you.